This dude has been following me around. He will not let me do what I do. That's the thing. When you come out here, man, you gotta chill. What's up, man? What's your name, man?
My name?
Yeah, what's your name?
Obama.
Oh, your name ain't no goddamn Obama. This dude will not leave me alone, man. This dude is hustling, trying to sell everything. That's the thing. If you come out here, you try to enjoy yourself. These dudes are hawking you, hounding you, trying to sell something, trying to get you on a tour. They hustle hard out here, man.
I said to my brother, I probably will never go Cairo again unless I absolutely have to. Wow. Like, I literally did not. Like, everybody is just on a grift there, and that sounds really mean, but everyone is just on a grift. It's very much every aspect of existence has been monetized.
Where come from?
I'm from Scotland.
Oh, Scottish?
Yeah, thank you. You like the Scottish?
Like the British. Hey, look.
You don't like the British?
Excuse me.
But I'm British, so you don't like me?
Can see?
Oh, you do like the...
I'm
okay.
from England. Mo Salah.
Mo Salah, okay, for Liverpool. It's okay. Hey. I don't need any gifts. But thank you, brother. I'm going to have a wee walk around.
Welcome to Egypt. Something that is a receding argument, and I will talk about another one in another video, which I'll probably upload just after this one, is this concept of the new African. This used to be something that Europeans or European scammers used to say all the time on the internet. You see, one of the things that a lot of the Eurocentric type people wanted to push was this idea that Africans were not the first people on Earth. And so they basically tried to make everyone not black except West Africans. And the video I'm about to see and watch and reply to is that. Now, unfortunately, it's in the same format of somebody not talking, so I'm going to have to read it. So it starts off by saying non-existent Negroes in early Egypt. If we read, it says, before the Bantu expansion about 3,000 years ago, true black Africans were absent from the continent's central, eastern, and southern regions. They were also absent from the Middle Nile until about 4,000 years ago, at which time they began to appear in paintings from pharaonic Egypt and in skeletal remains from Nubia. So yes, you heard correctly. The claim that is being made here is that black people basically did not exist outside of West Africa up until, until the Bantu expansion. So what they're trying to say is all the people that from Mota and all of that, they're all a bunch of white people, Khoisan people. That's why you hear people say that. I know some of you think that where did that come from? You hear videos that come out a month ago, 2 months ago. Where do they know that from? This is a old Eurocentric trick. So let's see what other nonsense do they have. True black Africans appear as a recent adaptive radiation, apparently branching off from an ancestral pygmy population, a line of ancestry also indicated by some nonsense. This radiation seems to have occurred somewhere in West Africa. So again, they're just making stuff up. And I would put studies, but we all know that this stuff is fake. Like, we know that black Africans have been around for a long time. In fact, we know that studies have proven that we were the first people on Earth, and we expanded throughout the entire planet. So it carries on to say the Y haplogroup of Egyptians, that is the parental lineage going through the father's side, which cannot be altered, makes all Egyptians from the ancient through to the modern image biologically impossible for the modern Egyptians to be invader. The Y chromosome make Egyptians today pure indigenous Africans, more than Sudanese or Ethiopians. Migration out of Africa happened perhaps 50,000 to 70,000 years ago, long before 2000 BC, when the first Proto-Bantu appeared. Bantu people settled throughout Africa after 1000 BC. Early migration Africa were recently not Bantu. So let's quickly respond to that nonsense. So first of all, we all know that the only people who could even come close to qualify to being West African are West Africans, North Africans who are of black stock, because we know that they've been related to West Africans forever, and the Bantu people. Everybody else is still black African, but they have their own genetic lineages as well. And these are the Khoisan, the Ethiopians, which, by the way, we see the earliest of them being Mota inside of Africa. That's a DNA sample which is used against a lot of other DNA samples to test. And it was used in the Israeli one to find out that there was some Ethiopian DNA amongst the early Israeli people. Of course, it's the most diverse place on earth, so we can prove that there is a out of Africa thing happening, which is funny because he uses out of Africa. One of the things, and I've played a couple of those videos here, is there are videos that try to doubt the out of Africa theory. You may think these videos are like fun videos that they're just uploading, but in real life, they're trying to undermine the out of Africa because they want to claim that there's something unique about people outside of Africa. And if they can't have that, then they want to say that there's something defective about people inside of Africa. That is why they want to separate us from their history, which we are fully connected. By the way, I mean, I will read this, but when someone starts talking about DNA a lot of the time, they're just choosing whatever they want to do. But DNA haplogroup E would appear to have risen in Northeast Africa based on the concentration of variety of E subclades, blah, 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 today, but the blah, blah, blah closely linked haplogroup D, which is not found in Africa, leaves open the possibility that E first arose in Near or Middle East and was subsequently carried into Africa by back migration. E1B1 is by distribution. It has two important sublineages, E1B1A and E1B1B. E1B1A is an African lineage that probably expanded from northern Africa to sub-Saharan Africa and equatorial Africa with the Bantu agricultural expansion. I think what I love about that one is that even he can't convince himself of that nonsense. He has to say probably and maybe and could be. Like even he knows that what he's saying over there doesn't make any sense, and he's trying to leave room for himself. And as I mentioned again, it doesn't make sense to believe in the out of Africa theory and then say that Africans were stuck in West Africa. It doesn't even make sense. The thing of North Africa being used here, of course, this person doesn't like North Africans. He's gonna say use North Africans now, but he doesn't like North Africans either. This thing of like, oh, they got the DNA from North Africans because, of course, North Africans have Black African DNA that traces back thousands of years, and so because they can't get rid of it, they have to do it the opposite way around. Instead of them getting it from the Africans, we got it from the other way. But in mainstream, haplogroup E is seen as a African thing. So these people have lost that debate. So if we continue to read, the North African pattern of Y chromosomal variation is largely of Neolithic origin. Thus, we propose that the Neolithic transition in this part of the world was accompanied by demic diffusion of Afro-Asiatic speaking pastoralists from the Middle East. These people could have carried, among others, the E3B and J lineage, after which the M81 mutation arose within North Africa and expanded along with the Neolithic population into an environment containing few humans. So again, that's just gobbledygook. I barely understood what they were trying to say over there. I'll be honest, I can't even respond to that. It doesn't even make sense to me as a statement. Okay, so here we go. Getting straight to the skulls of people, Caucasian skull. So basically you can see that they're trying to say that Ethiopians are Caucasoids, Indians are Caucasoids. Basically everybody is, except of course Asians, like East Asians and Africans, which by the way, I love that they didn't throw in most of the Africans, they just threw in Horn of Africa. Even though we know that Ethiopians are Negroids. Before the Bantu expansion about 3,000 years ago, true black Africans were absent from the continent's central, eastern, and southern regions. Imagine that. Imagine actually believing that as like a true statement. But this guy actually does believe that. So again, the funny part is that he also believes that the Nubians were black people, which means there must have been black people somewhere else. Caucasoids who arrived during the Paleolithic thrived and remained there till this day, reflecting 40,000 years of uninterrupted continuity. Nope, that never happened. Especially not 40,000 years ago. Again, random date. They're trying to make it as far back as they can. And you notice this with, if you've ever watched Kemet Queen, she tried to make it 70,000 years ago. You know, they always pick whatever date that they can so that they can make it seem like the days go back thousands and thousands of years ago. Nubian foreigners in Egypt are just that, foreigners. And of course, so now Nubians are foreigners to Egypt, but in your earlier video, they were always there. Egyptians are Egyptians. Here we go. So, by the way, this is something that you will see. They will pretend like they are in love with Arabs, right? This is something they will do. They will pretend they will love with Arabs. Like, oh yeah, Arabs are the ones who are the first. You saw that they put images of like blue eyes on these things, and so they claim that the ancient Egyptians had blue eyes, which is different than what Arabs have. Arabs do not look like that. So this woman is wearing, tons of makeup, so that makeup is making her lips look bigger. You'll actually notice the dip in this area where the light shines. That light that marks her lips, that's a common trick used by people, especially in the Middle East, to create the illusion of full lips. Of course, the rest of the statues look little to nothing like this woman over here, especially given the dark color. Non-Afro shop. I don't even know what that means. I'll be honest. I'm confused. See, they always show the one that's blue because they want to claim that the ancient Egyptians were blue. But then when they can't get that, then they claim that they were Arabs. But then at the same time, they're gonna then claim that Arabs aren't the real Egyptians, actually white people. They're gonna do that in later videos. This, of course, is not just to take the culture away from the original people, but in order to, okay, see, when the people don't have the lip thing covering, you can see it. Hybrid Negroes does not equal 5th dynasty scribe or ancient Egyptians. Anyone, I don't know what hybrid Negroes means. Early 1st dynasty, this was the people who was in Egypt, not Negroes. Again, that's a doll and it's got like dreads on it, so I don't understand. Fayum Egyptian, ancient Egyptian. I'm glad he finally said Fayum, so he knows that he was full of it. So this image here is very telling one as well, because that image, the guy looks so black, so funny. Oh, okay, because only people can braid the hair. Here's another one. Afrocentrists, people of West Africa tribal heritage, usually Angola, Liberia, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, who have no link culturally or anything else to North Africa. History brought over the Americas and Caribbean to work as slaves. These people, slave descendants, were sold out by West African tribal leaders. So that's the funny part as well. They have to try and throw that in there, because as much as they want to be like, oh, we colonized you guys, they understand there's going to be a reparations argument, so they want to blame it on the West Africans. And then they say, today the sellouts are the living descendants of the traders who sold their own people out. Huh? What the hell? Guys, confusing sometimes. Egyptians are not Caucasians. So funny. Well, they're not Caucasians. Egyptians were not white. Their favorite quote, which is true. by the way. Even if they were Arabs, they wouldn't be white, because we know as much as you do that you don't consider Arabs to be white people. They're white now in this image because you want them to be. Caucasians can't take the sun in their reasoning. Caucasians are only European. Well, first of all, let's start by saying that that's not our reasoning. The word Caucasian isn't even a word that we really use. That's your word. Let's see what other nonsense. The expansion of Caucasians in Africa has been correlated with the spread and diversification of Afroasiatic languages. No, it isn't. Populations that. So we're going to have to react to this one in a more direct way. So you can see the limitations of the Afroasiatic language. And we must remember that historically, it was in the regions that Arabia or the Arab language is dominant today, but it came from within Africa. The Caucasians, the so-called Caucasians, their languages come in this direction, and you can see that they cut off where the Afroasiatic languages are dominant. And of course, they weren't always in Russia the way that they are, or in Germany, or in the Celtic regions. These are the Indo-European languages that came with the Caucasians, something that they don't want to say because, of course, it will completely remove them from ancient Egypt. We know that there was a giant change between those early years. And in fact, we see it when the Hittites, or the Hittites, go into war with Egypt. For the first time, we see some indication of Indo-European slash quote unquote Caucasian coming in from one place to another, clashing. And the clash there is very important because it's probably the first time in history that the languages really had to compromise and find out what the true differences is between them. One of the things that makes it so difficult to uncover some of the early European writings that you can see in the early days that mimic Egyptian script, one of the things that makes it difficult to uncover is because they wrote in a language that doesn't exist today. So in other words, the group classification is early European. They've got nothing to do with Indo-European languages. So you can't just follow it back. You can't just say this word probably means that, because we have no idea what those words mean. This is one of the scripts that comes from the Minoans, and you will easily see some similarities between it and that of the ancient Egyptians and other North Africans. It adds some validity to the idea that North Africans had writing in the early days, the ones that sort of look like the ones that would later belong to the Garamantes and people like that. But this is still a large debate. We know, though, that a lot of these symbols are very equal to those found in Egypt, and we have found Minoans in Egypt. So let's continue to read. It says, Afrocentric favorites, false assumption that these are the laughable descendants of the ancient Egyptians and mixed Negroes. So basically, well, I'll just leave that there. Populations that exist at the boundaries of these continental divisions are sometimes the most difficult to categorize simply. For example, East African groups such as Ethiopians and Somalians have great genetic resemblance to Caucasians. They don't have great resemblance to Caucasians. And also it can work the other way around, by the way, and are clearly intermediate between sub-Saharan Africans and Caucasians. No. The existence of such intermediate groups should not, however, overshadow the fact that the greatest genetic structure that exists in the human population occurs at the racial level. Let me read that again. I don't think I understood that. The existence of such intermediate groups should not, however, overshadow the fact that the greatest genetic structure that exists in the human population occurs at the racial level. Okay, so basically he's saying that he's racist here. He's saying that the biggest thing that matters about people, even if you look at the mixed race people, is their race. So that's what he's admitting right now, even though, again, he's trying to pull these people into the Caucasian group. But he's not going to be like, okay, since they're Caucasian, they belong to the better group. He's still going to put them in a rank lower. This is just an excuse to pull them out of the group known as Negro. I don't understand the images that he just put. Compare against old kingdom statues. Okay, so they look the same. Especially, by the way, look at that woman there, Ndebele woman, and then compare her to the statue right at the bottom, the first one from the Ethiopian guy. You can clearly see the similarities. Put these admixed Negroes against pure Negroes. The pure ones look closer than the admixed ones. So what's your point? Or, okay, I don't understand the point of that. Amenhotep the first renewed Egyptian subjugation, the 11th dynasty. This is something that they do, by the way. I actually try to slow down a little bit so I can read it. These are Negroids who have taken a lot more of the European gene or parents of the heavily admixed. These are Negroids who are admixed with the indigenous North African, Eurasian, going back generations. Nope, it's not true. Again, it's just saying stuff. There's no proof behind everything they're saying. Again, we have Mota, which proves that that mixture doesn't even go that far back. Fayum Egyptians. I agree that the Fayum Egyptians look like this. Okay. These are like Dinka type Negroes, which are not common to all types of Negroes. These would have been no different in ancient times. You can see there it throws in the word slaves because, by the way, it would be different because Bantu people look very different than the people of the. They look very different than the Dinka type people. Tasmas led a military campaign against Nubia. He also led a military campaign against Asia. One of the most famous campaigns against Asia. Amos, at the head of these army, boasts of capturing single prisoner. For the record, we cite a brief passage. Thank you for going away. The inscriptions on the stela of Sihathor and Assas. Look at that. Here we go. I hope they're about to get into this whole. I passed Cush, sailing southwards. Then His Majesty returned in safety, having overthrown Tut sandals, symbolic of crushing the Negro enemy, which that's actually hilarious that he puts it there. If you look at the other side, they have the Asiatic being enslaved as well. And so in his head, with the full beard and everything, so in his head, he thinks, oh yeah, we just conquered, we just dominated. Look, your own people are right there. Well, to be honest, it's probably not your people. You probably don't like those people either. But it does show bias that right there. By the way, for all of you who can't see it, I can see it, but I hope you guys can see it too. If you look just above these two people, what do you see? Look at this part on both of the shoes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the 9 bows. Meaning it's not about the Nubians, it's crushing Egypt's enemies. So this idea that it's like, oh, it's the slaves, it's not got nothing to do with the Nubians. This is wishful thinking. By the way, you guys probably can't see it, but this is supposed to resemble directionally northeast, southwest. So this is north, the Asiatic. The south will be the person in the first shoe. Then east, which will be this other Asiatic person, and then west, which would resemble the Libyans, would be this person. You could tell because they're not dressed the same. Look at the the two people who look like Nubians, they're both not dressed the same. One is from the Libyan side, and the other one is from the uh, African side. Not the African, the southern side. Now, why would I make a claim like that? Well, because we have the nine bows. They're not trying to show some of the people. They're trying to show all of the people at the same time. The nine bows are all the enemies. So, of course, Africans point out that we came from the beginning of the Nile, where God Happy dwells at the foothills of the mountain of the moon, which proves that they're from the African side. But then he goes, our favorite Afrocentric coke, however, the clear evidence shows the God Happy standing over captured and bound Black Nubians, another deceit exposed. So, for those of you that don't know, Happy is the Nile, or it's the personification of the Nile. And the ancient Egyptians were aware that they came from the mountains, that they came from the south and went up. And so they're saying here, we came from the south and went north. And this guy's dismissal is to show an image of two separate things, by the way. In Egypt, when they want to show you crushing someone, they won't put a gap between the two of you, as they did in that image. Even in ancient Sudan, from the rock carving there, they sold each other out. Look at the elephant holding the ropes to restrict the Nubian slave. So this Sudanese image that we are seeing here, or this Nubian image, I like for a couple reasons. One, because it shows how much other stuff they put on the elephants. You know, when we think of African elephants, we think of them just being normal. This image, by the way, which is showing slaves, it's not clear that the slaves are Nubian, but you can see right at the front, and one of the giveaways is the fact that these people sort of have a little bit of a beard. But at the front, you can see a Nubian person. That person is not a slave, but that person is doing something, which might be trading slaves. Now, of course, I don't understand what his point is by doing this. I think he thinks that showing that there were slaves in Africa means that everyone was a slave, which is weird. Livingston dynasty, lion holding Nubian captive. So tell us, what with the ancient Egyptians using lions symbological to hold Black Africans, this is a reoccurrence during the dynasty. So the simplest connection between Africa and lions in ancient Egypt is the fact that Sekhmet, the lioness, goddess of war, vengeance, and healing, is strongly linked to Nubia through ancient myths, where she, as the Eye of Ra, fled Egypt in anger and went to Nubia or Libya before being pacified and returned. So, which, by the way, another thing is, Sekhmet is thought to have first been a Nubian god or goddess that was then converted to Egyptian mythology, which is probably why they have this Nubian history. Here's another one of these useless images where they just throw images and then they say something. It's like they just threw a whole bunch of images and then they were like, went, see? And it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you getting at? What is this trying to get at? So yes, I definitely see that these are images, but I need a point. By the way, look at the real woman with her hand up. Look at her lips, and then compare them to the lips of all the other women around her. Now listen to this next part. The pre-dynastic of Upper Egypt and the late dynastic of Lower Egypt are more closely related to each other than to any other populations. As a whole, they show ties with the European, Neolithic, North African, modern Europe, and more remotely India, but not at all with Sub-Saharan African, Eastern Asia, Oceania, or the New World. So you saw there a desperate attempt, which, by the way, tells you where these guys really put the color of Black. They actually like Sub-Saharan Africa is what they call Black, but notice how they dismiss Eastern Asia, Oceania, and the New World as well, because they know. But then they then go and say, which is hilarious, that the people represent Caucasians, meaning Europeans, which tells you where the person who's making this video is from. Here we go. We start with this Neanderthal admixture, which, by the way, remember how like there was no Neanderthal admixture, and then all of a sudden it just started existing out of nowhere? I don't buy it. We detect likely West Eurasian genes flow in the ancestor of Europe, West Africa within the last 10,000 years. Of course, which indirectly contributes a small amount of Neanderthal ancestry to Yoruba. These results mean that we have not identified any sub-Saharan African samples that we are confident has no evidence of back to Africa migration. So for those of you who didn't believe me when I said this, they're not just claiming that the people in East Africa or whatever have a back migration. They're saying everybody in Africa, including the West Africans, which he was talking trash about earlier. Now all of a sudden no African has unique DNA of that kind, which goes against what he was saying just a few minutes ago with the Neanderthal thing, because Neanderthal DNA is not found within Africans, which would mean that if there was a back migration, which we know that Neanderthal DNA mixed very early when they got outside of Africa, we should find this Neanderthal DNA, but we don't, meaning there was no back migration to those people. It's all made up. So what should we take away from this video? Well, the answer is, or what we should take away, which, by the way, I'm going to talk about them talking about the blondes and redheads in Egypt. Another receding argument. They're running away from this argument as fast as they can. Something they used to take seriously. Remember, I told you, scholars used to say this. They used to say that Ramses was a redhead and he stood out because he was a redhead. He was he stood out from the other Egyptians, and that would have made him feel weird. It's like he's not a teenage boy in a movie. He's literally the pharaoh. There's no feeling weird about being anything. So I will tackle the red-headed argument or the blonde Egyptian argument in another video, but I want to first concentrate on this image here. You can see that this is the hair of the people, which, by the way, they like to say it's a wig, but then they will use this image, which the person has the exact same hair as those lost people, and it's a queen or a female of the royal court who is very important. But they're gonna say, "Oh yeah, that's her natural red hair. Isn't it so amazing that she's got red hair?" It's like, what happened to the wig thing that we were talking about earlier? Suddenly, it's not a wig because it's got red hair. They completely ignore the fact that ancient Egyptians used to change their hair color, and they used to change their hair to match, firstly, the Nubians, and then they would change the hair color as well. Which, of course, when you look at the Nubian hairstyles, you can see some of these colors coming through. Look at them. We can even tell. So the first guy has got slightly red hair. The second guy's got like yellowish. The third guy's got more black but some brown. The fourth guy's got black hair on the top and then yellowish at the bottom. They don't understand. Like, simply, these are just ways of changing the hair. And of course, these Nubians aren't all jet black. They range black, brown, which is a trick used by the Egyptians to show the, so it doesn't just look like the same color traced, because it has a weird effect when you do that. But also look at the person behind helping, the person carrying the gold. That person's got jet black arms, the other one's brown. And this goes against the myth that all Nubians are just strictly jet black, which is something that can be disproved today if you go to Sudan. Now you might be saying, hey, but why are you going against someone who's obviously so ridiculous? Some of his early arguments were so crazy. It's because they're slowly moving us in that direction. I know you guys think they're not, but I promise you they're moving you in that direction. Eventually, West Africans are going to have Caucasian DNA somehow. even though somehow we're not going to have Neanderthal DNA so that we can remain different but the same somehow. But then we're not going to be part of Egypt because we don't have Caucasian DNA, but we're going to be part of Egypt because we are Caucasian. We're going to be a part because we're Negro. These ideas are clashing against each other. Now you might be wondering, why did I show that intro where I show that there's a whole trying to sell you stuff in Egypt type thing going on? That's because it's a whole thing. It's not just science the way that they try to put it out there. There's a whole marketing thing that's going around. And remember, I told you, because of that marketing, they can't just say these are black people, because if they said that, there is a group of people who would go, well, then it's not that impressive, because they don't want to know about a black civilization. India is one of those that should get as much attention too, but it doesn't, because they know that the population there is different. Remember, some of the older German people focused their attention on India because they wanted that civilization, when it turned out that actually India was a let's say a black civilization. That's when it was like, eh. But before, they really were trying to go for it.